The last section in our Unit 2 discusses parallel and perpendicular lines. So we have a few things we need to make sure we are on track for before we are able to start solving these problems. And that is mostly centered around the fact that we need to make sure that we remember how to find slope. So the formula for finding slope is the difference in y over the difference in x, because slope we think of as rise over run. So this is what we're going to focus on today, and then on your next lesson, then we will focus on how we know whether or not we have parallel or perpendicular slopes. Parallel lines have the same slope, perpendicular lines have the opposite reciprocal slope. So how do we find a slope from the equation? We are going to look at the m. M is the variable that we use for slope. It comes from the French word monter, which means to rise. So whenever I am looking for that, it is always in front of x. So if you can find the x value, you can find the slope. So when I look at this problem here, here's my x. The number in front of that is -2/3. When we're finding the slope from a graph, we're thinking about rise over run. Rise are my y values, run are my x values. So always start at the leftmost point, and then from that leftmost point, we count the number of boxes. So 1, 2, 3. So we go, our rise would be -3, and our run is 1, 2, 3, 4. And that would mean that our slope is -3/4. If we're finding the slope from 2 points, this is where we have to use the formula. So before we can start doing this problem, we need to assign x1, y1, x2, y2. It doesn't matter which pair are your 1s and which pair are your 2s, as long as you make sure that one coordinate has both an x1 and a y1. It can't have an x1 and a y2, and the other coordinate has an x2 and a y2. Then I'm going to take my formula, and I like to write it with parentheses in place of the numbers, because notice that this formula has this subtraction sign in the middle. It's very easy to confuse the subtraction sign with the subtraction sign or with the negative sign that we might find in front of our numbers. So that can just help us keep things straight. So using that information, I'm then going to, it says we're going to do y2 first. So my y2 is 0. Then we do y1. y1 is 4. Then I do x2. x2 is -4. And then I'm going to do x1. x1 is 3. And that's how I have defined those numbers. So that's how I decided where to get that information from. And then I'm just going to do the subtraction. So 0 minus 4 is -4. And -4 minus 3, take the sum of those numbers, and that's -7. You can use your graphing calculator to help you simplify, but a negative divided by a negative is a positive, so the slope for this problem is 4/7. Let's do the same thing for the second one. So I'm going to assign x1, y1, x2, y2. So y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Notice in this case, we end up having this negative negative. When I have two negatives in a row, that means that they are going to be treated as positive numbers. So this negative negative is like multiplying a -1 times that -1. So those are both become positive. And this negative, like multiplying by -7, so those will become positive. So then that gives me my answer. -2 plus 1 is -1. And 8 plus 7 is 15. So my slope is -1 over 15.